Mayor Andrea Horvath says tonight's town hall investigate the city's latest overall inflation rate fell to
$6 billion in profits.
Competing in yesterday's mayoral by-election.
If you ever doubted
Kim Droves from the Hamilton Bar teens and their parents.
All the way to about Appleby line.
Experience you need, results you want.
The Bill Kelly Show. The Bill Kelly Show. The Bill Kelly Show. This is where it all comes down. This is where it all happens. The Bill Kelly Show on 900 CHML.
Hey, welcome back. This is the Bill Kelly Show, 980 CFPL in London, 900 CHML in Hamilton. Good to have you with us today. Should neighborhoods be allowed to veto tent encampment locations? There's going to be a big meeting at the Convention Center in downtown Hamilton, actually one of a series that are upcoming about encampments and about what to do with them. And there are going to be opportunities for the public to talk, and there's going to be some dialogue. It may get heated from time to time. It usually does on a topic like this. But a number of neighbors have simply said, look, we're sympathetic. It's terrible that these people are in that circumstance, but not in my neighborhood. That's all there is to it. The city, on the other hand, is saying, you better get used to it. That these things are not going away anytime soon, so we have to manage it. Well, that could mean that they designate certain areas for this, and that's not necessarily going to be pleasing to some of those communities and some of those neighborhoods. So that's going to be our topic, our last call just after 11:30 this morning. Should neighbors and neighborhoods be allowed to veto tent encampment locations? Look forward to your input in that discussion. Right now, speaking of City Hall and discussions, a good news story for Hamilton. Hamilton has smashed its record for the fastest climb to $1 billion worth of building permits. That sounds like a good news story, doesn't it? There are a number of projects that are on the go. And to assess what's going on here and talk about the impact, pleased to welcome back to the program John Best. John is the publisher of the Bay Observer, which looks after things municipally in the Hamilton-Burlington area, around the Bay, coincidentally. John, good to have you back on the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be with you, Bill.
In this time of economic turmoil for an awful lot of communities, including cities, looking for revenue generation and going with some of the largest tax hikes that we've seen over the last number of years, this presents a bit of a different picture. Should we be celebrating?
Well, I think we should, Bill. It's what's happened here. If you sort of follow the progress of these building permits that are announced every year with the Economic Development Department, it used to be the big news was we hit $1 billion by the end of the year. Now we're getting spoiled a little bit. That's at least the second or third time we've hit the billion mark in June, which points to a $2 billion a year if it doesn't work in a completely linear fashion, but at least we're on target for that. And I think the other piece of good news is that at one time it was almost entirely residential construction, and we've all heard the comments that some people insist that residential construction doesn't necessarily even pay its own way. I think that debate still needs to be debated, but in this case, we're now starting to see a much larger proportion of industrial commercial as part of the mix. So in this latest number, 322 million of the 1 billion is industrial and commercial. And that's the part of the building portfolio that creates jobs. We keep hearing we're going to get 200,000 more people here in the next few decades. And we mustn't forget that if that's going to work, we need jobs for these people, and therefore we need job creating activity and new industry. And so all of that's coming along. And I think it's a pretty good news story, Bill.
From that standpoint, though, and we just want to clarify, I mean, as you mentioned, this could be a huge, multi-million-dollar apartment complex, condo complex, something like that. but it could also be somebody's, new deck or extension on an existing deck. And you may say, well, including that, but that, as you mentioned, John, they're buying the materials, and that's good for the economy. They're hiring people to build the thing, and that's good for the economy too. So, I mean, every one of these is a good news story. It's just a matter of variations as to how much of a contribution it is. But it's better than what we've heard over the last number of years where not much was going on.
That's true. And the residential portion of this $1 billion is about 58%. So that means, 40 odd percent is non-residential, most of which is industrial and commercial. And that's where when you talk about investing in Hamilton, that's where private sector businesses take a look at Hamilton and say, this is a place where we want to locate. And it's happening more and more. And I think the other thing about it, Bill, is we have industrial parks dotted all around the city, Upper Red Hill, out by the airport, the McMaster Innovation Center, Stony Creek. And what seems to be happening both currently and in the pipe is there's activity at almost every one of those business parks. So it's not just concentrated in one area. It's scattered around the city, and that's a good sign. I think the folks at Economic Development would tell you they could use more industrial land if they could get it. And that's sort of on stream with what's happening with the former Stelco lands. Some of that property, because we have a lot of servicing down in the industrial area now, some of that property could come on stream within the next couple of years. We could start seeing, some new industrial development down there. So there's for years people said, oh, why can't you build on the brownfields? And then we did some, there was some research done, and it turned out most of those brownfields are being used for something, even though they may not look like it. And now we're actually opening up some brownfield area, a significant amount of brownfield area. And we're probably going to see that sooner rather than later.
Are these the fruits of past labors? I mean, to get us into a position where we can take advantage of this sort of stuff, John, here in the Hamilton area. And one of the things that comes to mind immediately when I think of business growth is Peter George's vision, the late Peter George from McMaster University, with the McMaster Innovation Park, which was really a kind of a retrofit of an old factory in the west end of the city, which he turned into this huge enterprise. And it's a beehive of activity now with entrepreneurs and new ideas and thoughts and people growing businesses, etc. And it wasn't something we were good at before, but it seems to have been able to mature and grow there. And I mean, that's as strong a foundation, I guess, as you can find for businesses to be attracted to this area, to know that it's a hub of activity and innovation.
Well, and if you visit that particular park, the Innovation Park, you'll see that we've gone way beyond the old appliance factory and head office. In fact, the factory part has largely been replaced by new builds now. There's a lot of new buildings popping up in that area. The plans call for eventually, and maybe again sooner rather than later, you may actually see a hotel there because there's so much innovation and research and whatnot going on that it makes sense to have a short-term and even a medium-term facility there where people can pretty much live right in that park while they're participating in research and development. So that's a good news story. You think of what was there when it was an abandoned appliance factory, and you look at just even the landscaping and everything around that area now. It's a nice place to be.
It's a different kind of industrial complex, though. I mean, Hamilton's heritage, of course, has been factories. The steel industry certainly plays a large role in that. But there's Procter & Gamble and Firestone and some of the other places down in the north end of the city, down by the bay there for many, many years. Most of those are gone. And the challenge was reinvent yourselves, guys. Do something different. I mean, and it took a while, and there were a couple of swings and misses along the line there, too. Like, hey, we want to be like KW. Well, no, KW is KW. You can't replicate that. And we've come up with an interesting mix here of new concepts and new ideas. And it's, I don't know if it happened organically or if it was part of a master plan, but it's happening anyway. And I really kind of defined this city. And when it looks at the business community and for that matter, the medical research committee, which seems to have really flourished here too.
Well, I think the advantage that Hamilton had over some other communities is, and we talked about this for years before it sort of came to pass, but our geographic location, the fact that we got railways in all different directions from here, we're on a great highway system, we're on the seaway, we're a port, a major port. We're close to, a day's drive. You can get from here down into New York, Washington, Pennsylvania. So, I mean, those advantages were always there, but I think what you've seen is a slow morphing of at least a certain chunk of our economy is based around logistics now. We have this airport that's got a lot of cargo activity now and hopefully passenger activity. We're always hoping that that will stick with us. So, transportation is a big piece, and transportation, quite frankly, was the reason that we became a heavy industrial powerhouse at the turn of the last century. And now that we're producing different kinds of products, including steel, I think our location is a big piece. But if you go back with the folks at ECDEV, I think they saw this coming. I mean, the planning that went into developing job lands around our airport, that's been with us for almost a decade and a half now. And there was, back when that was first being floated, there were people who say, why are you doing this? And they trotted out theories about peak oil and planes aren't going to fly anymore and all this crazy stuff. And now you're looking at some major activity up there with major players like Amazon, DHL, and some of these big companies, UPS. So, somebody was right. Somebody had a vision 10 or 15 years ago that is working out now.
Well, I mean, this market and the London market too, for our listeners at CFPL. I mean, airports play such a key role in economic development. And you're right. I was around in those debates, and the naysayers were loud and long, but I mean, incorrect as it turned out, but the airline industry is going to go belly up and the people aren't going to be paying attention to airlines. And that's an industry that it's got its own problems. We understand that, but they seem to be pivoting on that. Listen, I just put a little water in the wine here, if I could. You look at these numbers, John, and they tell a story in and of themselves. But as you mentioned, the slight majority of these new projects that are going to be doing and the building permits that are being issued is for residential. And should we be cautiously optimistic? Because, I mean, I'm trying to connect the dots here between that good news and the fact that the Premier has pretty much said, well, yeah, those guys don't have to pay development charges anymore. That cost is going to get passed on to Hamilton taxpayers. And so great news, you're growing a lot more than we thought we were going to. The bad news is your taxes are probably going up.
Well, the development charge, the forgiveness of development charges applies only to affordable housing and public housing, which in a way is not a good thing. And the minister, even as recently as last week, still insists that the municipalities are going to be made whole. In other words, that somehow they're going to be compensated. And I think Hamilton is losing over $50 million. So we've got to get that back somehow. The minister has said repeatedly that the municipalities are going to be made whole. So I think it's really incumbent on the Ford government. Let's put some flesh on that. And exactly how are you going to do that? Are they going to be compensated dollar for dollar, or is there going to be some other way that the city is compensated? But at the end of the day, it's cash that's needed. And if we're foregoing $54 million in building permits, we just got to get it back some way. The province created this circumstance, and I think they have to deal with it.
Well, exactly. And again, then we get into part B of that question is where you're going to build. The industrial projects, I think that speaks for themselves because there's a particular part of the city that's zoned for that. But residential, there's going to be the extension of the urban boundary, and that's another provincial policy that is not real popular down at Hamilton City Hall these days. As a matter of fact, I think they've got their first application now from a builder that wants to build in one of those designated areas, and I'm not so sure Hamilton Council is going to react kindly to that either. So there's a lot of good news here, but still a few things that need to be ironed out, aren't there?
Lots of challenges in every municipality in the province right now, but at least we're on an upswing economically, and but that doesn't diminish the homeless problem and all the other really perplexing economic problems that municipalities are facing.
Exactly. Well, we're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. John, great to get you back on the show today. Great to get your perspective on this. Thanks so much for this.
My pleasure, Bill.
John Best from the Bay Observer with the good news story for the city of Hamilton with lots of applications. And that hopefully is an indicator of commerce starting to get back on its feet and maybe even start jogging a little bit. Hopefully we'll start doing the sprinting to higher economic success in the not too distant future. Let's do a quick break. I want to talk about setting up our last call segment for you.